Hello, everybody. Scott Stevens here on the Metadime Digital channel. And let's just go full screen there. While I say hi to you, get to know you, I can even take the glasses off because I can kind of see there. It's crazy how the vision goes as we get on through our lives. It was like probably my sophomore year of college. I realized that chalkboard was getting a little bit fuzzy, and the astronomer I was also noticing that I was not seeing the stars as those pinpoints that they should be, and I was able to squint my way through TV until I was probably 34, 35. And then I had to go contacts all the time. And now it's like stupid. It's just like everything goes. All right, kind of a big weather day across the planet. In the States, it's cool. There's still some heat going on in some of the high plains of Texas, but that spawned some thunderstorms. Apparently, the strongest typhoon on record in the Bay of Bengal today. So that is land making landshore and impacting that population. And the population were coming out of COVID hibernation to find spring in the north and a beautiful fall weather down south in the southern hemisphere. So we're kind of in that beautiful temperate zone where we're not so hot or we're not cold just yet down under. Let's head on over to Twitterland. See, I got to go squint there to do that so I can kind of see what the heck's going on. I get shapes and colors, but it's so good to see. So I just kind of on my Twitter feed to highlight some of the stories that I find fascinating. Weather-wise, there's a lot more out there than what I get through, but this is a whole lot more than I get to touch if I were simply on the air. But the big one in the States is that deep churning low pressure in the middle of the Mississippi, mid Mississippi, but more so Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and the Great Lakes states, where we've had three dams collapse in Michigan in the last 4 days of just nonstop rains. And we're coming out of winter where there's already been runoff. The soils are not hurting for water like they would be in July or August, where we get a lot of evaporation, and the plants have been transpiring or pulling that moisture out of the soils. But this is certainly happening in Michigan, where you can see the vegetation. We've gone green because they've had a couple of green weeks, or let's just say green trees from a couple of weeks of warm weather. I'm really good at the tongue twisters, but kind of tenuous situation for those folks dealing with that. And this partially is the storm, the big one churning across the Tennessee River Valley. Now, what's interesting, is Stu posted earlier today from the Weather Channel, is these are the remnants of Arthur. Now, kind of without steering currents to push it out into the North Atlantic. It's kind of opened up and it's being drawn back in. Eventually, it just simply melts away and doesn't have a whole lot of oomph. The other thing is, and it was talked about yesterday, is something that I have not terribly been familiar with. I've seen it in passing, but not had the heads up that this is what is developing. It's a CAG, or Central American Gyre. And that's going to open up the tropics for Mexico, the southern US, Bahamas, Cubas, and so forth. So we're going to watch that literally in the next 2 weeks. If this is going to be as big a deal as it is modeled to be, we could be looking at an additional named storm. I believe B would be Bertha, if I'm not mistaken, as we get to probably the 1st of June, if not a touch before. And I'll show you the models are picking up on one of those events here truly within the next 2 weeks. So Taiwan has had 24 million cases and 440 coronavirus cases and 7 deaths. Sweden, 10 million people. So half the people, less than half the people, 26,000 cases and many, many more deaths. And so the question is weather a variable? Is the nice weather, is sunshine, is natural air, outside air, a disinfectant as they presumed and operated under the assumption that it was back during the pandemic 100 years ago? They would take rows and rows of patients. They would open up the doors to all of the hospitals and let the fresh air in. And then even at night, in the day or night, those windows were open. But for the U.S. Army, which had many, many soldiers in barracks and Army hospitals, they wheeled them outside and left them outside to be in that fresh air, in that sanitized environment. It was only in the antibiotics came on the scene that old wisdom was put away. All right, back to that big storm dealing with flooding in the western portion of the Virginias. We got a couple of flash flood watches or flood advisories, and I promise you that's not the only one that we're going to see. The rise of solar power dependent on sunshine. and this is Western Australia, where they have gone whole hog, where nearly 1 in 3 homes has some installation on their roofs or wherever they can get solar gain. What's interesting is now on those sunny days that aren't necessarily so hot, where the homes upon which these installations are is requiring the use of all the power they're generating. So the grid is becoming unstable from so much solar power because it isn't able to maintain a base load demand. So what they're saying is that the solar is creating more power or funneling more power to the grid than is needed, and so they've already got coal, they've got other assets that are online, and so the grid is becoming unstable. So they've got to turn into a smart grid so they can literally manage this process in a smarter way. All right, back to temperatures stateside. Kind of cool in the west with another big low spinning there, and cool in the east. The really only sliver of heat has been through Texas and along the high plains, and then that heat is funneled northward into Saskatchewan, where the 70s and 80s were fairly common. I'm going to refresh this map as we get into the latter part of the afternoon to get close to the high temperatures. Granted, the sun is already set back east, the sunset terminator working across the Central Plains states, but 40s in Idaho in late afternoon when typically lower to mid 70s. So there are locations that are dealing with temperatures underneath this deep cutoff low that are some 20, 30, 35 degrees colder than normal. As that cool, dry air sweeps out and encounters that heat, massive storms are beginning to erupt into West Texas. And I had a guy post on here just before we started that no chemtrails in Scottsdale, and then someone, Dare a Rebel, I believe that's what it. Oh, Drastic Rebel, of course, glasses. Drastic Rebel just saying crazy trails today. And if I come over to this next image, it's going to be the water vapor imagery. This shows yellow is where there is dry air, where between 10 and about 24,000 feet, the atmosphere is too dry for clouds to condense. And the humidities are probably sub 40%. Obviously, clouds are where we're going to see the white. But I'm going to look for where we would see contrails or chemtrails, where that would be, where this Derek I would be from, and that's probably going to be New England, because there's really not much else out there, at least stateside or in Eastern Canada, that is really being or demonstrating these stripes in the sky. Come in a little bit closer. Let's change the regional sector. Let's come in and wait for this to refresh. I'm going to assume that's it. Let's come in here. And this image should load fairly quickly, even despite the demand load of the stream. And we could see all those stripes up in the clouds here as they sink across Maine, New England, and then eventually. So this is often what we see, and that northerly flow is where we'll see a lot of those contrails beginning to manifest. So here's the deep low churning out west with good rains. This is a place that has been so dry. The winter snows were okay. The spring was okay. But, when you do so much irrigation, you've got to have that water stored in the mountains. It just has to be that. It just has to be that way. And then with the severe weather, I'm going to come down one more and see if this doesn't take me on into Texas. There we go. And it is nice to see that let's throw on the warnings overlay. Yeah, a few severe thunderstorm warnings, but nothing tornadic. And that's probably the good news. Oodles of lightning. Oodles of lightning. That's always fun. I always enjoy a good little lightning storm. Oh, hey, ties. I like ties. I don't know why, but ties are kind of cool. For guys, we get to dress up. Girls get to wear all kinds of crazy stuff. Guys, we're stuck with a shirt and a tie and a pair of pants. But if you're sitting at a table or at a desk in the news, all you get to see is the suit jacket, suit and tie. So our clothing budget, when you have a clothing budget from the station, really tends to go nice and far. So I could get a nice assortment of suit and ties. Still snows out west as we have a look at that. I'm going to go full on screen here. Just because occasionally, the resolution of these streams isn't necessarily guaranteed. And I've seen a few that have been ugly fuzzy. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to get anything out of that. So still unsettled out west, where we've got the red hashes looking for some severe weather through the remainder of today. Tomorrow that migrates to Kansas, Nebraska, into North Carolina. And then once in Kansas, Nebraska, and then the risk of even mid-elevation snows in the mountain west is really going to become a risk. So some of those ski resorts, Targhee, Jackson Hole, Sun Valley, and then some into Montana, likely to get accumulating snows on what some of their runs could be. That is definitely a possibility. Some of the news going on, Memorial Weekend forecast, summery pattern expected as we head on to the couple of days. Satellite imagery. If you've got a favorite place to go get your weather imagery, this is truly an amazing storm in the middle part of the country. And then that typhoon, that cyclone hits India and Bangladesh, the death count at 8 thus far. And this is kind of a curious story, but in the era of coronavirus and social distancing, should you go to a hurricane shelter? We can spend our lives in the what if land. What if, what if, what if? And, let's just, even if the hurricane season ends up being a little more active, maybe we'll be in a position to where we're not dealing full on with COVID at that point in time. And maybe we are. Maybe we are. But maybe we'll get the gift of not having to have a landfall. These deep lows, these deep cutoff lows, and the deep troughs in the west, they tend to moderate as we run out a couple of days through the week. The west gets reinforced with another surge of cool air. It definitely warms up next week through the weekend. I guess this is Memorial Weekend coming up, isn't it, guys? Or maybe, yeah, probably. Yes, it is. I guess this is it. If it is the last Monday of the week, so this is as early as Memorial Weekend can be. See, when you're not working the 9 to 5 for the boss, I tend to lose days. Last night I was out looking at the stars and amazed at Scorpio, and some of those summer constellations were coming up already, and it's getting towards the end of the May. So the cool weather is probably going to persist out west. And as we go through what likely will be a kind of a grand solar minimum event, this wavy jet stream pattern is going to become more frequent. So we'll see greater incursions of colder air coming south later into summer, or later through deep into spring, let's put it that way. And then earlier in September, in August and September, we can have those frosts. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. I might even do this show from outside on Friday just to kind of show you how we're working a garden. We did virgin land here at the house. Been here for a couple of years, but just haven't done anything with it, but just kind of feeling the need to get the garden in. And because where I live is literally hostile to growing outside, it's kind of a gamble to throw in a garden and throw all the efforts into an outdoor grow situation. Even if it's just leafy greens, it's risky up at 8,000 feet. It really is rather risky. So the reason I wanted to show you this map, if it'll load, is this event coming out of the Caribbean, so that maybe and potentially this central or this American gyre, this event begins to take shape. Granted, this is a long ways away. This is truly the end of the month, but we're beginning to see this storm possibly developing. This is the third model run that's had it. That certainly doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but if we do have that, as we begin or get into the first part of the month of June, we might be looking at a rather interesting turn of events in the tropics. All right, everybody, I've run up on 15 minutes now. That'll be it for the day. We did Smart Perspectives. If you want to catch that up on Facebook, as we begin to talk about some other topics outside of just weather. And we'll do that weekly Wednesdays. And then tomorrow morning, I'm doing filling in for Vicky Helm, doing the Coffee Break show. So that'll be an adventure in itself. All right, guys, have a great night and keep looking up. I'll see you in the morning.